And because this is a live stream, it's kind of a free-for-all. You know, give us a chance to chat, but if you have any questions for Marlowe, feel free to shoot them in the comments and we'll try to get to them even as they come. I don't know, this is like such a fun kind of twist of event planning in a post-COVID world, so I'm just going with it. Normally I'd be like, write your questions down formally. No, let's just hang, guys. Okay, so Marlowe, do you want to join? This is also the debut release of a brand new publisher in Toronto, based in Toronto, Flying Books TO, which I'm super excited about. The people behind the scenes there are incredibly dope and rad, and I just think they're going to be doing some very cool things. And then they just proved me right by releasing this book, which is exactly the kind of dope and rad thing that I thought they would do. Okay, welcoming. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, good. How are you? Oh my God, I'm trying to like make it so it's like not so close up. Hold on.
Okay, yeah. You're literally balancing behind like a candle, and like I'm terrified that at some point in the middle of this conversation it's just gonna. But all good.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much for joining. Am I like, is this a weird view? I don't know.
No, I mean maybe like a little bit like a little bit higher.
Okay. I'm just gonna. Okay. Just
like push back. Like
yeah. Further and further. It looks better and better. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
I really appreciate it. How's the week been? You're in Pub Week, debut author Pub Week. Are you like flying?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So I was I had all these different events and like all these different things like floating around in my mind, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to like write it down. So I bought 2 different planners, and I had to like write down everything twice because I just couldn't like picture it in my mind. But now it's been a bit easier just going through the week. And although I will say I thought today was Friday for like all day. I was like, it's Friday today for sure, it's fine. Weekend's coming. I was like, no, it's Thursday. There's still a whole full day tomorrow.
I don't know what time it is. I don't know what time it is. I don't know what day it is. Fair. But how's like just, I don't know, this feeling of being here in this moment where this book is like officially out in the world?
You know what? I do struggle sometimes to take a moment and process and kind of like be like, this is happening. That's so interesting and cool and amazing. And it's been so long time coming for all of it to kind of come together. But I think that like right now I'm finding it really interesting, I guess, first because a lot of people kind of received it maybe a little bit early before pub date. And so there are already some people who, you know, have been messaging me really sweet notes, and that's just really, it's really interesting and invigorating for people to like read the text and understand kind of my intent with the book. And really like in the first week, that's been so amazing and really fulfilling, I think. And that I've been trying to like be like, okay, like that's so nice. And I never know what to say. I'm like, thank you so much for reading. That's so sweet. Thank you. But for now, yeah, a lot of like the interviews are coming out this week, and a lot of like the, I guess, reviews. I know today, like just a couple of hours ago, the Quill and Choir review came out. So it's so funny because all these things are coming in, and Martha, one of my publishers, she's like calling me, and I'm like on the go. I'm like going places. I'm like, what is going on? What's happening? So yeah, it's really, it is interesting. I have to keep reminding myself to be like, okay, like let's just take a moment, enjoy all the time.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine because like, you know, I was a book publicist, and so I get it. It's like there's so many details and like agendas and things that you have to get caught up in when the book comes out, like, and understandably. But yeah, definitely I think you need to take a moment to be like, you wrote a book and like it's out now, and like and that's kind of incredible. I mean, okay, so I'm completely subverting all. Normally would have had a proper introduction of what this book was about, which is kind of its own, I find that a little bit hard to explain, but in the best way. But I would say it is essentially a story of these 2 young girls who are free-spirited and wild, and live in New York, although the stories take you throughout some cities across the world, actually, and the kind of lines that they weave in their friendship and in their personal lives. Is that a fair description?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting to me because well, one of the questions I have, if I'm ever turning away from you, I'm not leaving you. I'm looking
No.
But so one of the things that I was thinking about, and I think I'd read and heard you talk about this sometime this week, maybe in one of these interviews, but you had addressed that you've been working on this manuscript for a while, and that it took a bit of coaxing to really push you to do something with it. And it sounds like there's an amazing happenstance story between you, Emily, and Martha that, like, please do share. It's not TMI.
Right. I mean, it wasn't that. So basically, as the story goes, I had finished this book in 2016, and my agent had gone out with it in 2017, and it was not like, it just didn't land in New York. Like, people didn't really get it. Like, they were kind of like, this it's a really like weird time right now, and I don't think this is the right moment for this novel, or they just didn't really get the characters, and they didn't really understand the intentions behind like these two young girls where nothing really like happens, meaning like something bad happens.
Right.
So I think that, yeah, I and then what happened for me personally at that point, I was like, so I'd worked so long on this manuscript, and I was like really, I had this feeling of bereft, like I just didn't know where to go from there. And I was like, okay, like, well, we're gonna have to put this one away for a second. And I find that, yeah, so basically I had put it away, and my agent was like, why don't you start a new project, and maybe we can sell that one before we sell this novel. And I was like, sure, let me just go ahead and continue writing a manuscript with no guarantee of publication. That sounds really good. Another 4 years of my life or so.
Right.
And yeah, so I kind of like shelved it, and I kind of was like, took that time to really involve myself in bad relationships and bad things for myself. And I filled my space, like filled all this time with unsavory people. And then, yeah, the story kind of goes that, yes, I had met Emily at her own party, and she didn't know me. I didn't know her really. I didn't know anything that she did. And there were, I guess, whispers that I was a writer. And so people were like, they all knew me, but then she didn't know what I had written. And I was like, I don't have anything online right now. So here's this manuscript. I was like, please, like, don't feel the need to read it all. And then I didn't know this, but obviously in her mind, she'd already been talks with Martha Sharp about Flying Books. And so it kind of developed from there. And it was just so funny because at first, when they kind of expressed interest, I had this kind of like look of bemusement, and everyone says that sometimes I am hard to read with my face, and they were like, aren't you happy? And I was like, yeah, like I'm happy. I just like don't know what to say. It's so funny. Like,
are you a Scorpio? Did I read that?
Yes.
This book is such a, well, like, cause accurate, but like this book is such a Libra book, and I am a Libra.
Really?
Yes, I find anyways, like with the beauty and the glamour and
yes
about it. But that's so interesting that you say that. I guess the reason that I was asking, and I want to be clear, the narrator's line, I'm not sure is it Issa or Isa?
Issa.
Issa, yeah, okay, so I've been reading right. I've also been watching Insecure, so my brain is. But there's a line where Issa says, finding the time to write is so difficult because things are always happening. And I guess that's what I was wondering, if that was kind of your experience writing this book. And it sounds like you took a break and went off and did all those bad relationships so things were happening.
Yes, I think that sometimes, especially for me, I'm really not a solitary person. I have a really hard time kind of sitting at home by myself. Like, if friends know me, they always know that afterwards, after a day of work, I'm always like, should we do something? What should we do? Like, where should we go? The night is young. Like, I just want to go out and do something. And so in this case, yes, I used to have to choose between whether going out or like maybe spending the day writing, because if I do one or the other, like for sure,
yeah,
I don't feel like really writing the day after I've gone out, or and sometimes that does take a toll on your process because, you know, when you're just like constantly like, I just want to have, this is my like adventure time.
Yeah.
Sitting down and being and like writing while life is happening simultaneously is quite difficult. And you have to kind of compartmentalize the process of like being in your own world as a person with friends and partners and family and all that stuff. And then also being like, I'm writing for, you know, 4 hours a day and no one can talk to me. Please don't distract me or else I will just distract myself at this point. If I let the door, if I leave the door open at an inch, it'll just like fly open.
Right. But it's true, right? I think it's true. It has to be true. Tell me it's true. I think it's true that the living part is what informs the writing. Like it is really necessary. It is like, yes, discipline is involved to get the actual like labor done, but like a lot of the work is in the living, right? I think so.
Yeah, I would say 100%. I say this a lot in terms of when people are like, well, how do you do like dialogue or how do you like think of these things sometimes? And for me, so much of it is just talking to people and also listening and kind of understanding like the different kinds of rhythms people like the speech patterns and all these things, because as I was saying in a couple of these interviews this week, is that like Issa has a really specific rhythm of speaking that I think is kind of unusual, and also it kind of gets in your head. It was definitely in my head when I was writing it, and I've heard from people that after when they read like maybe a chapter or so afterwards, they feel like funny. They're like, they start to start thinking like her.
But the thing is like, and it's almost like extra because like the book is filled with all this like obviously this appreciation for vintage culture, vintage fashion, but the prose is almost vintage to me. It read like an older book. And there's a way that like literature in the past has used language as a very matter-of-fact kind of style, but that was incredibly solipsistic, which I feel is exactly the rhythm that I read Conan. And I'm wondering, it also weirdly, like when I was done, I was like, oh my God, there's a playfulness to this novel. And I was like, what is this reminding me of? What is this reminding of? And I have a very obvious comparison after, but did you ever read Ramona Quimby, like Beverly Clearly books when you were younger?
No.
Okay, so they were like a huge staple for me, but the reason, completely different, obviously. One is like a younger book, but there's a playfulness and an intimacy in the narration that like you just don't see in contemporary literature a lot anymore, which was why it was so fun to read, I think. And there's a sense similarly with Ramona and with Issa where she talks in such a way that it's kind of like puzzled of like, what's with all these grown-ups and why aren't we all just having fun?
Right.
And I'm just wondering if, I guess, was that a conscious thing? Was that like you like harking back to like an older style of writing, or is that just your natural way of
I definitely think it was influenced. I would say that like in terms of maybe like a book that I find influential that's almost like a children's book is, you know, Issa's kind of like in a way like Eloise.
Yes.
Where, you know, she's kind of like the way that even like the speech patterns of Eloise is very like she has these turns of phrase that kind of have these double meanings that you pick up on if you're reading it as someone who's like not a child, and you're oh, this is kind of enjoyable and fun. But I think that obviously for me, what I wanted was to have that stylistic nature of previous memoirs and you know, novels that were written by women from you know, like the 20s and 30s, but then up until like the 60s, where it was like these women who did live and have these amazing lives while they were writing, and the style was so much part of the appeal and
so you must love Eve Babbitts.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do. I find that sometimes she's a little bit like it's very much like almost like a log for me sometimes, but I do appreciate her even as a figure, and yeah, I think that what's sad for me is that I think that like that style was also quite like feminine, and like the way of being like very playful with language and having this kind of rhythm and like long sentences and this way of unpacking a story, where you're kind of where Issa does this thing where she kind of like picks out like certain things that are visual and then picks out like bits of conversations that maybe she's heard, and then makes like a couple of observations about the social like circumstance that she's in. Mm-hmm. And that's the way that she's kind of piecing together a whole world. And that's kind of what, for me, really actually made me quite sad when I finished writing the book, because all of a sudden I was out of this universe. And I was like, oh no, like that was such like a fun like place to be, like, to inhabit for so long. Mm-hmm. And then after I finished, I was like, where do I look to now for this kind of like lightness and mm-hmm. pleasure?
Right. That's, I mean, I think in that way, that's, your book is like a gift similarly, because like I wasn't writing all those months and all those years or whatever. And so mm-hmm. the time that I got to spend with this book, I had a similar feeling as a reader. I was like, so in love with this playfulness, this wonderfully feminine place to be. And then when the book ended, I was like, now where do I go?
Yeah, no, it's I feel like it feels like something very specific that I also didn't feel in a lot of things that I was reading at the time. I was trying to find it and grasp it, especially in terms of something that is like set like in a contemporary world. Mm-hmm. And because I had lived that kind of life with my friends, and it was more about kind of preserving that as it is also like how Issa is also preserving herself in the novel mm-hmm. as diary. Mm-hmm. And to kind of be like, this happened. This was like this. This was fun. Like, and yeah. I hope that when people read it, they do find something to like some sort of like courage to be bold and to have this kind of sense of adventure that kind of reawakens, which has, I think, been a little bit dormant currently in the pandemic.
I totally agree with that. And it's absolutely exactly what it did. And it's like, you know, I very much identify as a woman. I'm incredibly proud of like my girlhood, my womanhood. And I think that was part of it too. That was part of the thrill, mm-hmm. is seeing that. And so, yeah, there's this feeling that permeates throughout the book. There's this obvious celebration of femininity, of womanhood, girlhood, you know, and then there's similarly an obvious kind of element of the kind of downfalls that come in with that identity as well. Men are trash, etc. Like this is how society treats the world, treats us, etc. Kind of reductive, but I think you know what I mean. And I guess I'm wondering, because there's that indulgence, because Issa and Gala walk around in this universe with such confidence and buoyancy, and then occasionally they are met with downfalls or mm-hmm. like crushed. Maybe that's mm-hmm. a hyperbolic term, but right, they're still fallible. They're still human. Mm-hmm. Issa in particular, there are these men. She is this kind of greater than thou character that's like above all this stuff, but she's also human and mm-hmm. her heart. And I guess I'm wondering if you could talk about the ways in which you carry these characters, these women up, and then kind of take them down, and what that writing process is like.
So I guess especially writing the situations with men with Issa, what's interesting is, you know, that she has so much, like she really tests the boundaries of how much agency she's kind of allowed to have in certain situations. Yeah. And with men, she's often like pursuing, and it's funny because I was saying this to publishers, and I was just like, you know, like a lot of the time these girls are like pretty unsuccessful in love and in like romance and all these things. Like they're very like, but because they're so they demand a lot, and they're like, well, why can't this be possible right now? Like, I would like to go on a date, like right now. Like, why can't this happen? I guess what the downfalls are, and I guess writing those downfalls, it's often that, you know, people can be, I guess they're not really down. I feel like it's more like disappointments. Like right. they're like young women who they know they have like a kind of vague idea of what they want, and they're interested in finding, you know, chasing that and pursuing whatever can be pursued at that moment, in that time, at that party. And then what happens is that once they kind of pursue it, the sheer force of their pursuit drives a lot of people away, because a lot of men often are intimidated or like want to be, you know, like come out on top and have that power in the dynamic. but I find that Issa's often like very much like, but I don't want that power dynamic.
Right.
I want to also be the one to ask for things and get them in return, because I guess that's also in the Noel situation. Noel's character is so frustratingly, and just for context, it's this character that, you know, she's seen around, she's kind of like had a minor infatuation with from like maybe a year before, where she'd met him very briefly. And because he kind of pulls away from her, she truly cannot compute why this happens. She's like, I just don't understand why this can't work. Like, I find him attractive. I want to like have him, but he won't have me back. And it's because of that resistance, I think that, you kind of also see that she, even though she carries herself so strongly and kind of so assured in certain situations, there is that kind of vulnerability when she doesn't get what she wants, and she's just like, she's confused, and it kind of challenges her identity in that space. And yeah, like writing that, I think that ultimately it just seems natural that girls who, or at least young women who live day in and day out like that, often in one night they can have like these like really high moments of flirtation, and then like these low moments of like a screaming match later on, like just a few hours between each other. And I think that's just like the velocity of the way that they live.
Right. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, the velocity of the way they live. It's also just like, it's just fallible, I think, and it humanizes them in a really, you know, endearing kind of way, because they are these, I hate to say strong women, like it's so overused as a term, but like they are like these incredibly empowered young girls. And I think emphasis on young, because the thing with the younger we go when it comes to femininity, the more we as a society, I think the discourse tends to take them less seriously, and thus like is not used to an emboldened young teen girl, 20-year-old goal. Like we leave that for like 40-year-old strong women, like whatever, but like that's not necessarily true, nor is it, should it be the case. And so I think that it's really interesting, these downfalls that happen in the book, that you write so well, because I got so angry and so crushed at like two scenes. And one of them was definitely the Noel scene, which is like, in Alex, our store manager's words, I feel like you'd call it iconic. There's a scene with Tuzi. Am I saying that right?
Tuzi, yeah.
Oh my God, like how do I share without spoiling the viewers, but like he is such a piece of shit. Is that like he is at a certain point in the book, he really toys with this younger woman, and you can tell that he has this kind of assuredness as a man that he couldn't possibly be doing anything wrong, and everything that he's doing makes sense. And I love that Issa's like has no time, like sees through it, or like you know what I mean, like she has a barometer of what she will tolerate. But another thing that I think that the book does is, okay, so there's this line in page 102. I hadn't had the chance to say hi to Annabelle yet, but I overheard her explaining the work to an art critic. Don't you know, a woman's first taste of power is through sex. That's why people want to strip her from her own body. The possibilities are too frightening. And I think that when we talk about the sexualization of young women, the discourse is so often around pain, or like themes of pain.
Yes.
And what's so exciting about this book is that these girls have agency, and it's not just about pain, it's about fun, which, you know, should be the goal, I think. And I'm wondering if you could speak more on that, if that was like a conscious thing that you wanted to come across as well, or.
Oh, 100%. I think that often, like, and this has been coming up as well, where I'm very much like, I see how so many different like depictions of young women with active love lives, and them kind of having these like very disappointing encounters, and I think that is obviously very true, but I also think that like there are moments where over the course of like even like a single date, there are like bright spots, and there are like negatives, and there are like these moments of like irritation or annoyance, but that's also simply because two strangers meeting and getting along and going on a date, and, you know, finding something to meet in the middle about, and also being attracted to each other is quite rare, especially in like an urban space. So I think that ultimately what I wanted too is that, and I've been talking about this a lot, is that I wanted like two women characters to just not be punished for the things that they choose to do. And,
Right.
you know, and I was talking about this at the book launch with Lauren Mitchell, where, you know, she was saying that often when we're reading about young women, there's this moment of being like, dun, 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 like, when is the bad thing going to happen?
Right.
And like, that just doesn't interest me. Like, I guess it is often like, and what's true about these characters is that, yes, they've definitely had those moments, and they kind of like talk about that very flippantly, where they're like, you know, I've had bad things happen to me, and it's kind of like, or like sad things have happened in like my family and da da da, all these different things. But ultimately, they continue on, and they are like moving forward, and they still have that really, this very specific, I think it's like a youthful optimism of hope and possibility, and still believing in like the future of like finding love and finding the next good night, and like being able to like going to a really good party, and that's just like day by day they take this kind of philosophy really in stride of like how they live their lives. I think that that is like one of my biggest kind of, I guess if we were to say like my message is, I do want people to be able to not be scared to do things that they want to do, because ultimately, like, and that's one of the lines in the book, that it's about how, you know, women often feel safer at home and in the house, but that was kind of on purpose. It's obviously very, very on purpose that the world makes us feel that way, because you know, women shouldn't be, you know, outside the house. And these girls are never at home. They like rarely sleep at home.
They barely have a home.
They barely have a home. They barely have things. They just go around. And I think that that's kind of this feeling of there is this like precariousness that I think is very true to how currently our economics are working, like, especially for young people. But it's also true of like, you know, young party girls, where they don't necessarily use a house for some sort of stability. They use a house just to sleep in when they can't sleep anywhere else.
Right. What are party girls doing in the time of COVID? What's your take on that? Is that like, I'm just dying to know, because like I have my own version of,
you know, I have more insight into that than I would hope the public would know about, but I feel like I think a lot of them are just kind of, I mean, for me and my friends, often, like, well, we did a lot of just like a lot for the beginning. We drank at home a lot, and just like we talked on the phone a lot. There was this, that was kind of the nicest thing, is that we kind of we went back in time, and we were just on the phone for hours. I'm on the phone. I'm just like, I like to make calls, so I'm always like, me and my friends we're doing voice notes, and we don't even really, we don't really FaceTime that much. But I think that also party girls are probably just dressing up at home in their clothes, which is what I've been doing for sure. Like, I think that was the only thing I could do to make me feel normal, was to dress up and master. I said this in like I wrote that piece in the Globe and Mail about glamour, that I mastered like the smoky eye. It's just like these different things. It's like for later use, just gonna master these certain aspects of like what my past life was like that I didn't have time for before, and maybe in the future I'll be able to wear a smoky eye out somewhere.
Oh my God, 100% relatable. Similarly, I've been having like dinners with, you know, the party of people that I see, and we've had for fun. I probably should watch what I say, and but you have to find, I don't know, you have to find your if it's so integral to your identity, and it sounds like this is something that it is. Do feel like it's relatable to me. It is a bit of a shock to, you know, for some people this was kind of like a saving grace. They were already introspective, they were already like not exactly extroverts, but for the rest of us it's been weird.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So okay, another thing I wanted to ask, this book is emboldened with a lot of themes of indulgence, but there's also very real and very blunt conversations about capitalism. And so I guess I was wondering if you felt this like push and pull between wanting to celebrate the luxury that these women were accustomed to, but also being like, no, 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 their parents are not like financing their like rent in New York. Like I was wondering about the push and pull between those realities.
Yes, I think that like what's interesting about the characters is that often when they're in social situations, they really do assess very acutely people's class and very quickly. Where even in the very beginning, when they first move into their sublet in Bed-Stuy, you know, they're making note of like all the people that have like very straight teeth that are like, because straight teeth to them, like, you know, like both their families are like, if you really like look at the text, like they're like immigrant, their parents are immigrants, and like straight teeth means like braces, means like, you know, like a quite expensive like thing for when you're like little, and that's a kind of like an investment that parents do for, you know, when their kids are older. I think that what the whole joke, I mean, I don't want to say that they're vigilantes in a way, but they kind of like to in their mind, they like to poke fun at people who they know are not even like close to struggling, even though that people are often like the way that they talk or the way that they you know, live is often like this artifice of struggle, where these girls are like, why would you pretend to be struggling? That seems so absurd. When these girls are like, let's eat like some bread today, but then like let's hope that we get invited for drinks, and then that would mean dinner. So, and then like they're just constantly calculating their own, like how much things cost and how much they can kind of get away with in terms of like, oh, like let's call up this person for dinner because I know that we can probably get drinks off them, and just kind of trying to maintain a lifestyle. I would say that also when I was younger, it was easier to get drinks than it was food. So that's also one of the other things. And you know, when the girls are making like struggle meals at home, they're like trying to, they buy from the bodega across the street, and they're like trying to like put cream in the eggs to make it more like filling, or they try to eat like these, like, I don't know, like the hot dogs and these types of things. I guess in terms of like the criticism, I think that they're just like constantly, they really are these like funny little foils to capitalism, I think, because they're just like, I don't understand, like, what do you mean? Like, they're not ever trying to like climb some sort of ladder. It's very day to day for them, and they're always like, well, why would you feel that that's so important, or that seems just, or when they're making fun of the writers, they're just like, how can you, like, isn't that just kind of like a press release? Isn't, like, if you're just going to be writing all these good reviews, like, isn't that just a press release? I don't understand. Like, and when people are quite are being a little bit like snobby towards them, they're just like, our priorities aren't the same as yours, and whenever you look down on me, I don't really care, because what you find important, I just don't even think about. And I think that that's the most, like, for me, like, subversive thing about these girls. They're just kind of like, I don't know what to tell you. I just don't care about that. Like,
yeah. I think
that's not going to impress me. I don't know.
I think that like shocks the system of so much of the surrounding characters. They're just like, but how can you not think like that? And then you take a step back. I imagine as one of the, especially again, one of the many male characters that you write in, take a step back and be like, wait, is this how it can be? And it's
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that with Issa, one of the things I always had to think about was her, it was almost like this persistent optimism where, you know, like, she could understand why someone would do something even though it seemed a bit like pompous or pretentious. Like when she talks about, you know, like models turning to artists because they've gotten too old to be models. They're like, well, I can understand why you would do that. I just wouldn't do it myself. And there's this kind, but there is this kind of like, she judges, but then she kind of goes back on it and is like, but I can understand why you would do that. It's not entirely like, I really tried very hard to make it so that these girls were never going to be very bitter. Because I think that it's like a bitterness is a very like ugly and contagious like trait. And I didn't want to have these girls be at all bitter. I wanted them to be very understanding, but also very like they have like a set of smarts about them where they're like, okay, well, that's what you're doing. I can respect that, but I'm not going to fall for it. And
I think
that's
they did
it.
just that. Yeah, they didn't come across as bitter to me at all. And kind of going back to what you were just saying, they both seem incredibly aware of their wealth, and it doesn't have to be money. Like they are clearly they've got some. They're rich in beauty, and like not just like physically, although it seems like it.
A pretty face is a passport. That's the thing.
Right. And they're very self-aware of that, but they're also like in celebration of, you know, everyone's in celebration of what they're in wealth, what they have in wealth. And so of these things that you have in wealth, then why not celebrate it? And then, but also just like the beauty in, you know, no one talks about the art of conversation anymore in a non-cheesy way, but like this book did, which I'm very grateful for. And they do talk about the wealth and beauty of a good conversation, of wit, of intellect, of humor, of like, and Issa, she has this one scene, I think, at a party where she's like, I'm always carrying the fun. Like, I'm just not going to talk. And she can feel the vibration in the room change. The room gets more boring because she's not putting in that energy. And it doesn't matter that she doesn't have such and such in her bank account. Clearly she's putting in something that's of value in the environment. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit more too about like the art of conversation, which seems like a really strong component to this book, especially when we think about the dialogue.
I think that there is also a part in the novel, like later on, where they're at this barbecue, and all these like very young models who are like Eastern European, they're very young, like 17, and where they feel like what they give isn't appreciated here, but mostly because and also Issa says that she can understand and sense this kind of sinister aspect of the men who are present at the party, who obviously are more interested in like power as opposed to being like curious. And the thing about Issa and Gal is that they're kind of curiosities in a way, where they can go into rooms and people are like, who are these girls? Like they're what are they about? Like, what are they doing? And I think that also what's funny is that obviously I think Issa in the novel is very skilled in conversation. She can like throw out a line here and there. But then also Gala is this, she's kind of like this, she's also a foil in a way for Issa, but she kind of injects this kind of authenticity, this brashness that is so needed in these these social circumstances of people kind of like, I guess the thing that like puffing out their chests a little bit every time that they talk to each other. And I think that was important to have that balance as well. And that was important for the whole novel, because also there's a section obviously where Issa's by herself, and there isn't that kind of this raw injection of authenticity that Gala provides. And Issa feels very vulnerable, because often Gala protects her in those situations. And, you know, and when Gala says something a little too brash, Issa can always smooth it over. And it's this very like give and take thing. And it also, it's very, it's kind of, not that it's a defense mechanism, but it keeps them in a bubble that protects them from a lot of criticism, because they don't care. I feel like if they're alone and someone says something mean, they'll take it to heart a little bit more. Because the other one isn't there to bounce off of them. They're like, oh, is it like that then? I don't know. And then the other one's like, no, absolutely not. Like when they're, you know, and I feel like it's also really important to have that kind of friendship always.
I totally mean this as a compliment from my perspective, but I'm wondering like how much you think these girls are rooted in reality, and like between fantasy and reality, because
like in their own minds.
Yeah, because I think what's so fun is they have this openness, right? To the fantastical, and they kind of make it a reality. But so I'm wondering, like, maybe I'm wondering to you what the secret of like being like a badass when something like maybe that's, but you know what I mean, because how to like embrace that fantastical bit without like losing yourself, or maybe the point is to lose yourself. I don't know.
I think that often, I think this also goes back to kind of like what I write about when I talk about glamour. I think that there is this kind of sense that I think a lot of people when they get older they lose is that if you go back to kind of the way that you were as a kid, you know, and you were kind of always playing in these different worlds, and it gave so much like life to like your day to day in ways that as when you get older as an adult, like you no longer have. These girls are living in a way that is like they can live these types of fantasies by the way that they dress or the way that they're kind of like portraying themselves one night. I think that it's not necessarily like having to be like rooted in reality. I think that it's this way of living that is very much part of the way that a young woman feels that they can control like the perception, the other people's perception of themselves, and also the way that they kind of put together and curate what's around them. And in a way, it's always, of course, a lot easier to just kind of be like let like reality like wash over you. But if you are the kind of person that is like a little bit more maybe sensitive to the world, and you've experienced like real like sadness and trauma, or like, you know, like family like grief and all these like very heavy things, there are often ways that you try to protect yourself and also like control how you move through the world. And I think that is also so key in these girls' lives, that they are trying to be as in control as possible, and by whatever means necessary. And if that is kind of like dipping their toe in a certain kind of like illusion of any sort of grandeur or fantasy, I think that just like makes it more palatable to live day to day.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. Yeah, that exactly answers the question. I also, I guess, I don't know, I don't really have much to say here, but to this point, but it's just, well, Issa, the way in which Issa remarks upon her mother in the book was incredibly moving and tender. And I just think you did a really wonderful job of doing it.
Thank you.
I don't think that, I don't know, I feel like sometimes that doesn't necessarily come across, but it was because the book is not, it's about a lot of other things. A lot of other things are really busy. But when we as the reader reach those moments, there's like this really genuine calm that like kind of disrupts the book. And I think that is just, I thought you did that really, really well.
Thank you.
I guess I know that this book hits a little close to home in some ways. So maybe this is an interesting question, but like, are these girls, like, do you think about them? Like where they're going to be? Are they going to be like growing up with you? Have you thought about them down the line past where this book takes them?
You know what? I think that yes and no. I think that I often am very much, I have like, you know, it's funny because last week I was having like crazy dreams. I had these weird dreams where all of a sudden, like, you know, like afterwards I was writing like this sequel, and all of a sudden it was some sort of weird like caper moment, and like all these other like my friends were like, why would you do that to these characters? And I was like freaking out, and I was like, I don't know why, like they needed to have some sort of heist. I don't know. So it definitely, I think like they're obviously like in my subconscious, like very like often. I think that like the time that it's been that has elapsed during the time of like publication and the time that I finished writing it has been so long that I do think that there was a period of time where I needed separation from them, where also, if you can imagine that writing Issa's voice was so like so overpowering a lot of the time, and it was just like, will I ever be able to not write in this voice? Like, what will my writing sound like not in this voice anymore? So I think that they're kind of present, but you know, people often ask me like, would you do like a little short story of them like down the line? And I'm always like, that's also very like modernist and very like 1930s, like in a magazine serial where you would like,
I like hadn't even thought about it. Like, oh my God,
you know what I mean? Like a little like oh, like coming back to these characters in a bit of a moment. And you know, maybe like it's an interesting muscle that you would have to try and get back into. And I love them so much, and that's kind of the reason why it's been interesting to have other people get introduced to them. And it's been kind of a running theme where people are like writing me like such nice notes, and I'm just like, you know, like, thank you so much for loving my girls. Like, these are my girls, these are my babies. Like, I love them so much. And you know, and people are always like, oh, is this very like much you? And I'm like, well, you know, like I'm 28 now, like, you know, the characters are 21. I feel very much like an older sister to these kinds of girls. And I also have like lots of friends who remind me of these girls even still. And yeah, I mean, they're always going to be like very close to me. And sometimes, you know what, it's actually a very good exercise. Sometimes, you know, when you like see a girl on like, I don't know, like any sort of app, like Instagram. I went really deep on a TikTok yesterday where I was just like, wow, this girl is really like living like a really specific type of life that I'm interested in. And, you know, sometimes I think that there is this like sense of, and it would be like very much like internalized misogyny, where you have this like this little like prick of like hate, and you're like, oh, like, I don't like this girl for some reason. Like, there's this small percentage of that. But then I think of the girl kind of as like Issa Gala, or like some sort of like contemporary of them. And I'm like, oh no, like, she's just like doing her thing, and that's fine. And it's a really good way to like keep me in check as well. Like, I feel like because also like, I think that Issa and Gala are in a way, if you didn't really read the book and you kind of like, you know, you maybe saw them on Instagram, let's say, even though they would never, they're not influencers. They would never. But if you saw them away, like, I'm sure people would dislike them, because maybe in some ways, if you saw them at parties, I'm sure they would probably seem annoying at some point. But because you have this close relationship to them while reading the novel, you can be like, oh, okay, no, that's just a girl having fun. That's so nice. I actually really like it.
Right.
And yeah.
No, I totally think that this book also shifted that in me similarly as a reader. I think that's going to be my new approach too, because I think I'm a cynical person who tends to have like an immediately negative reaction in a lot of ways, but there's a lightness behind something that can be perceived as so negative, or you know, I hate to say frivolous, because I actually love the frivolous, but you know what I mean? Like,
no, totally.
The kind of, right, but the kind of ways that you would dismiss something, there's a lightness behind it. This book is a celebration. It's a real celebration.
And yeah, I would hope people take it that way, because it is, I think that's like the most important element of the novel. And I hope that also the fact that it's out right now, I hope that people really are like taking it in a nice way, and not to read it too fast, because I feel like people have been reading it really fast. People have been messaging me like, I read it in like 2 days, and I was like, no, that's not like that. No, you got to like really like, I think it's one of those things where you kind of do like month to month when you're sitting and reading. But yeah, no, that's amazing. I think
but
that's
I think
also
it's
good.
part of what you're saying about like, especially in this time, this like specific state of the world, people were starved for this kind of celebration, this kind of fun. So I think that's why, at least that's why I was like, finally, like, because I also, you know, I'm a voracious reader, but like, so also as a bookseller, it's such a specific thing, and all customers watching can attest to this. They'll come in and they'll be like, do you have something kind of fun?
Oh my god, my publisher says this all the time, and I don't have that kind of intel that people ask that all the time.
Yes, all the time. And as someone who is reading all the time, I'm like, well, do you want some, like, I don't, but I have a lot of great things that are really good, but they will that's just like kind of the way that literature has been going, and now we'll finally have something that's just like pure fun.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. So I hope you're still writing, or considering writing again down the future. I know this is your debut, and like, it's a lot of pressure to put on you.
You know, I'm very unpredictable. Who knows what I'm going to do?
Okay, I mean, if anyone has questions, feel free to shoot them out in the comments. Alex is dazed in MTL, the store manager, and he's just like, no, truth to the customer query. You would know.
Love it.
Every day. Yeah. We'll give it a little bit, I guess. I don't know. The internet is odd.
No question, but this is
thanks, Jess. Do you have any other events actually that maybe you want to share, or is this?
You know what? This is my last event for this week, which is
For you.
this week.
Good for you.
That's why I kind of thought it was Friday. I was like, it's Friday. Like,
Right.
I do have another Instagram live. This has been my first Instagram live, actually. But hi Isabel, so sweet.
Aww.
And I actually am doing an Instagram live with Indigo next week, which is
Okay.
so funny. I was saying that to my friends, and they were like, "Oh God!" And I was like a little bit like, "I don't know. That's so mainstream." And then my friends were like, "Indigo to Syndigo," and I was like, oh.
I love that.
I was like, oh God.
Do you get your audience, get you the book out there? I mean, this is, Alex and I were talking that this is definitely the kind of book that we're gonna hand sell. So if you can like spread the word as far and wide as you can, because I think it's a hand selling book.
I don't know what that means. What does hand selling mean?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it means. Oh my God, we're gonna get timed out. Wow, I didn't know this was a thing. Okay, we're gonna get timed out. We have 2 minutes left on IG live stream. It just means that when customers come in and request books, we literally tell them what it's about and what the author's about.
Right.
It's up to like our one-on-one interaction. So
should we re-up the live again or something to do the Q&A part?
Sure, yeah, definitely. Well, we still have like a full 2 minutes.
Okay.
If anyone wants to shoot anything, you have 2
I'm
minutes.
here for you. You can also ask me for advice. I have an advice column, so let me tell you, I love doing advice.
True.
Anyone watching here?
God. Let me ask you advice. That's all I do with my friends. I'm the person. What can I guess part of it.
Oh, my cat's here.
Oh, great.
He wants to say hello. Let's have him here.
Hi.
I hear that cats are really like cute for live. He's like, he doesn't understand it's pub week. He's like, really like, I don't get it. Like, what is
I don't care either. Yeah. Okay.
Oh!
That will forever be on YouTube. That'll be the screenshot for this event. Okay, I think we're timing out. If you guys do have questions,
you know what? Why don't you can DM them to the
sure, and
the
then
bookstore,
we'll
and
pass
then
it on.
yeah, and then maybe if we can do like a little video or something. Hi, Bear. Yes, Bear says hi back.
Well, before it runs out, thank you so much, Marlowe, for doing this.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
Thank you for doing this book, and just like all the good vibes your way. All the good
Thank
parts.
you. I hope to come to Montreal when things are
normal.
normal.
My gosh. Please do, because I will drink everything with you if you want.
Yes. I love it.
Please.
We'll have a little party.
Please. I would love that. I've been starved.
I